World leaders have been speaking at the World Economic Forum virtually in Davos. China's President Xi Jinping spoke about the threat of global inflation to the post-pandemic recovery and the clampdown on big tech. I've been talking to the veteran China watcher David Mahon for his take on the speech.
It was a speech of a global leader. And interestingly, given the pressure China's under, there was no great deal of chagrin. There was no posturing on nationalism, which in some other Chinese officials has characterized their delivery. And it kind of follows with the way Xi, I think, tried to correct the diplomatic call last year in stepping back from being acerbic and responding to the kind of haranguing from the West. Because really, he's speaking in a climate of Cold War rhetoric and action, economic action on the part of the states. But that wasn't present. So I think it was a very good speech. I think he rose above the issues he spoke about. So a lot in it, but yes, I was happy with it.
Inflation preoccupying him in this speech and many other global leaders. It's clearly going to be a pressing problem for the coming years.
I think inflation is a short-term issue. Inflation has been the price globally, and to some extent in China, but not to the same extent, of keeping people in jobs, keeping economies going against extraordinary external challenges, which is, of course, is COVID. I mean, the problems of the world weren't because there were underlying deep financial issues and there weren't major problems with the global banks. So, yes, there is certainly a force coming in terms of inflation in most Western economies. I don't think it's a big issue for China in the coming 12 months. On the other hand, though, China is, in its trade account, it imports a huge amount of raw materials and components in order to export. And so there is inflation in terms of chips, there's an inflation around energy. Those things will have some impact, but it's manageable.
Reducing global inequality is always a major theme of speeches for Davos. I was struck by Xi's reference to the crackdowns on big technology companies and entertainment companies. I mean, that part of the speech could almost have been delivered by any global leader, whether they were sitting in the United States or Europe. There is this international concern, isn't there, about the rise of big tech and its lack of governance, and some might say its lack of responsibility.
It's a good point, Jamie. I think you could say that largely in the West, corporate interests sit higher than government interests. They supersede government interests. In China, the government interests and the interests of policy and society are actually not subservient to corporate interests to the same extent. And I think the moves last year and the moves against Tencent, Alibaba, and also Didi were echoed in this speech that China's not going to allow monopolies to distort its economy, and also the tech companies, particularly those that relate to gathering and utilising individual information, will be made accountable.
There was an element of carrot and stick about this crackdown on big tech, wasn't there? I mean, during his speech, Xi moved to address those concerns about this issue, saying that China is still open for business despite the curbs on those big corporates' ambitions.
There are no real problems if you're handling information in a responsible way. If you're using it recklessly, if you're selling it to multiple marketing businesses, if you're effectively randomly harvesting personal information, there are issues here, and they're beginning to try and curtail it. But fundamentally, most responsible tech companies, as most Western companies in China are, will have no real issue. They won't run into any great regulatory hurdles.